Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown, and this is our Caregiving Book Club. We actually interview authors of caregiving books to get a behind the scenes glimpse into what it's like to write and market a book for family caregivers and former family caregivers. So my friend is here with us today, Bruce McIntyre. Hi, Bruce. How are you?
Hey Denise, how you doing?
So this is our second Caregiving Book Club podcast and video chat with you. And it's the second one because you have a new book out. It's your fifth book. It's called Receiving Peace, 39 Exercises to Help You Create Calm. So tell us when you had the idea for the book.
So this is an idea that's kind of emerged over time, but like all my previous books, one of the primary audience members I have in mind when I'm writing it is me. This is a book
Yes.
that I need because I am prone to anxiety and stress and getting way too amped up and in too much of a hurry. And I need things to help me slow down. And one of the ideas of the book too was like, there are ways that we create calm that cost money, they take time, you have to drive somewhere, buy the gear, all that, and they're great. I love those. But what I really needed were like low bar instead of high bar access to calm. And so these things I've been working on, practicing these exercises. I've probably done all 39 exercises. I'm sure I have done 5 to 50 times over the years. And I found them helpful. And I thought, you know what, if I share these, I suspect someone else will find them helpful as well.
We should also talk about your caregiving situations, and it's plural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot.
So you've been helping and caring for your wife, Kathy, for,
It's 18 years now.
oh, okay, 18
We're getting
years.
close to 19, actually, I guess.
Wow.
And it's been up and down. That's been, the first 3 were horrible. I mean, I literally thought she was going to die early on. Then we found a new treatment for her condition, dermatomyositis, and she got to the point now that, she works. She's a first grade teacher. She's still 70-80% of where she would be otherwise physically. We deal with it. She gets infusion therapy every 60 days, and she's in bed for 4 straight days, but it buys us 56 days. So, so it's something we deal with, but it's become much more manageable over time. But yeah, also, my father-in-law has 2 or 3 conditions. They live here in the city with us, and he's struggling. My mother-in-law was diagnosed with a brain tumor about the size of a cutie orange, which is most likely benign, but we're going to be dealing with that in about a month or so. I have another family member dealing with dementia to a significant degree. And so anyway, yeah, a lot of things going on.
Which leads us to the quest for calm,
Indeed.
because you could really spin out with the worries around each situation. Something that I like to do is actually define the word. So I'm curious, how do you define calm?
When I'm calm, I have found my breath.
Wow.
I'm not, and when you find your breath, you find your thoughts. Sometimes you can observe yourself, and everything slows down. When everything's going at a frenetic pace, there's no calm, it
Yeah.
seems. But when
Yeah.
that's it.
And I think what's interesting is people might see us and think we're calm without realizing our internal stress. And what you've described is really this internal process of finding our breath, moving forward.
Right. One of the exercises in the book is, and when I do talks on, and I've been doing quite a few talks recently, is the exercise of 1. And because whether you wake up in the middle of the night with all these problems flying through your mind, or whether it's the middle of the day and there's just too much coming at you, it's usually because there are 5 things, 9 things, 13 things, and you just can't land any of them and you can't seem to focus on any of them. And to cut through all that to one, and often I'll just set the timer on my phone for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever and say, and write that one thing on one sticky note on a blank sheet of paper and say, I'm going to do one thing. That is a move in the direction of calm and clarity.
Something that's interesting is when I feel the pressure to do everything all at once, I think of you. Because in one of our conversations, you reminded me we don't have to do everything right now. Some things we can do later. We can
Right.
pick one thing to do right now. It's not all things have to be done right now.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if only I could remember that more quickly. I did
I
remember
think
it eventually. That was the idea of the book. I'm like, maybe if I write a book about it, I'll remember this.
Okay, so let's talk about actually writing a book while you're in a caregiving situation, multiple situations, I should clarify. You're working a full-time job. You have 2 kids who you love and are very actively involved in supporting and raising and loving. You have a marriage that is top priority for you. How do you carve out time then to write another book?
So that's the interesting thing. This whole process, I probably had maybe 3 or 4 times only at the very end of the process that I actually carved out a day or half a day. This thing is almost always done 30 minutes and an hour at a time. It's just, if I can do a little bit, one of the mantras is, a little bit of something is better than a whole lot of nothing. And so if I could just create small amounts of time to make some progress, the progress adds up, especially if I can do that 4 or 5 or 6 days a week. Before long, I look around and I've really gotten somewhere. But at the end of the process, there definitely are days that you just really have to be able to carve out hours at a time. But mostly I don't do it that way. Just small snippets of time.
Okay, and when does that time happen during your day?
The best time is early for me. I realize it's not for everyone, but my most productive and clear hours would be the AM hours. Sometimes it turns into late afternoon, and if I can just close the door, silence my phone, then afternoon can be productive, but usually it's morning.
So I want to ask you about deadlines and outline, and I'm saying that out loud, so I will ask you about deadlines and outline. Okay, so let's start with outline. You have this idea for a book. How does it become a form?
Yeah, so usually I do that. I've got the big idea, and I really think in terms more like storyboard, and so I'll go to a really large, like wall-sized dry erase board and just start sketching out, here are all the components. And then I try to put those components into some way that makes sense. And then that becomes a little more solidified into a document. But the document is always a work in progress. And so I'll think, like, for instance, this book, there's really 3 sections of the book. The first section are 12 exercises that are basically blessings and prayers, not of any particular religious bent, but they're all of a spiritual nature. And in the second section of the book are quick exercises that you can do. And in the third section, there's 15 of those. And those are maybe a little more in depth. You could spend, a few days or a few hours or a few weeks thinking about this. They have a lot more depth to them. And but the thing is, you don't actually really have to get out of your chair or spend one single dollar to do any of them. You just have to know to do them.
Yeah.
And maybe to revisit them and to do some of them over and over again. And I've told people as I've given them the book that, out of 39 exercises, if you find 3 that you would practice on a consistent basis, fantastic. If you have 10, you're an overachiever. If you like all and you want to try all 39, then that please write a review, you know. Uh, but you don't have to resonate with all 39 of them. If you find 3 to 10 that are valuable to you and you would practice them, that's phenomenal.
I'm curious. I like the structure that you just described. And I like that because in a caregiving day, we can't sit down, and I find it very difficult to even read a chapter. So I like the idea that I can sit down and read some pages and then actually practice what I've just read. I'm curious if you give us ideas about when to use the exercises. For instance, this would be a good exercise after a challenging conversation or a stressful hospitalization. Just curious about that.
So I think these are exercises, many of them that are good before, during, and after. But I think the most important would be before. If you can get out ahead of situations and you already have, some of these tools in your mind, in your toolbox, and these are the kinds of things that you start your day with, whether your day starts at 5 a.m. or 10 a.m. or whatever. But if in the early part of your day, and we're talking each in this book, each chapter is maybe 2 or 3 pages, or if you've got it on Kindle or an e-reader of some sort, these aren't long chapters. These are very accessible, easy to digest, but they have profound depth. And even though they are short, so to have them in your mind ahead of time, very helpful. Because sometimes in the middle of the thing happening, in the middle of everything spinning up, you can think to yourself, wait, I have enough for this. I can get to the end of this altercation. I can get to the other side of this dilemma. Or it is something to look at afterwards and say, okay, I've lost my equilibrium. I'm fired up, or I'm sad, or whatever. Let me return to this exercise and remind myself of what I know that helps me de-escalate, regain perspective, reorient. So before, during, and after, I think these could be helpful.
Okay, I love that. I love that. So I'm curious about deadlines. You have the idea, you start to work through the outline, you start to create the form. How do you give yourself a deadline, and then how do you stick to it?
That's a terrible question to ask. So this is book number 5. I've had books that they happen easily and quickly. This one eluded completion. I blew past deadline after deadline after deadline, and I just couldn't seem to land the plane on this one. I just kept working on it. I couldn't let go of it. I think you never have a book that you ever get to a point that you couldn't continue to work on, even once it gets out there. One thing I often say, is there's nothing. It's fantastic to have written a book, but there's nothing that makes you more vulnerable than having written a book, because even once it's out there in print, and you can put out subsequent versions, but people have that first version and you're like, doggone it.
Yeah.
So you can never, it's hard to let it go.
It's very hard to let it go. It's very hard to release it into the world. I always feel like it's taking your heart and putting it on a table and say, review my heart, review the essence of who I am,
Yeah.
which I just put in this book. Okay, so this is a great segue to marketing, because that's really what we have to do. We write it, we publish it, we put it out in the world, and then we have to tell the world that it's now available. How do you approach marketing?
So I've done that in different ways and to varying degrees of success. On this particular book, I have shared a lot of free copies. So I'm like, right now, I'm at this point of where a lot of free copies have gone out to people that I know. And there's a significant percentage of those folks that I'm just about now to get back in touch with and say, hey, here are 3 or 4 or 5 ways you could review that, or ideas if you found this helpful, to let someone else know that, or maybe a lot of someone else's know that. And would you be willing to do that? You don't have to. If you hate it, just let me know. If you love it, let everyone know. But no, I wouldn't. But I had someone just the other day who said, I'm going to take this book, I'm going to review it, I'm going to tell the truth. I was like, that's great, right? and and I'm like, no, you know what? It's the truth. Tell the truth about it. Tell what was helpful to you. Tell what wasn't. That's fine. Those are helpful reviews for people also. And but I'm doing that right now. And but also a lot of mine, I've done several talks on it recently. And for instance, I just talked to our state ombudsman appreciation event recently. There are a few other events coming up. So a lot of mine turn out to be live in-person talks with people of large and small crowds. And they're not sure what they think about it until they hear me talk about it. And they go, oh, and I say, like, look, if you like the gist of what I just talked about, this is the tone of the book. There's more of this in the book. And then I sell a ton of books. But that's a point of purchase, like live and in person. But I love to do the stuff that's live and in person with groups of people for whom this is helpful. And then, it seems that I find success on Amazon and digital. That's real feast and famine for me sometimes. In fact, my last book, there was an event that I spoke with a fairly prominent national speaker, and I made that book digitally on Amazon free for like 5 days. I didn't really check it for those 5 days. I should have. I sold a lot of in-person books, and then somewhere at the end of that 5 days, I realized there had been this massive spike. And, that I actually was on one of the, where you could actually snapshot it and say, I'm a bestseller in this niche area, whatever. And I kind of missed it because I didn't realize it had spiked like that. So that also happens sometimes.
Gosh, that is the truth, isn't it? You just kind of do something, you think this is a good idea, but then you don't follow up just because you don't know to follow up or think that there's anything to follow up on.
Yeah, well, it didn't happen to that. Success didn't happen to that degree previously when I tried that. It was okay,
Yes.
but it wasn't fantastic. But that one really was for whatever reason. So it's just funny. It's kind of feast and famine, I find, on that. Like,
Something that I do love is to actually use the book to create other types of content from the book. So you just talked about speaking. So now you have a workshop, a conference presentation, a ready to go presentation for any event. I'm curious if there's other ways you turn the book into something else.
Yeah, so definitely each component of the book can be pulled out. Like each chapter is its own entity almost. And so I have used those I do a thing called Weekly Inspiration. I've been doing since 2008, which is basically just my blog at brucemcintyre.com. And I send that out as an email every week. And so, each one of these has been one of those. Each one of those can be then any type of a social media post. It almost can be a freestanding contribution to someone else's work, of what they're doing. Yeah, it can 39 chapters, there's at least 39 ways. And then to multiply that by all social media platforms. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I also was thinking you also have a video series too. You could pull out
Yeah, there's
6 or 7. Yeah.
All kinds of options. That's right.
Yeah.
And you do the work once, but you can use it 5 times.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, I follow, I guess, experts in book marketing. And I read an article from a book marketer who said one of the best things you can do for your book is make it free.
Yeah. Well, and especially on Kindle, that's really easy to do.
Yes.
I don't know how some folks just grab it up because it's one of the free books of the day and it sounds interesting. And will they really engage with it? I don't know. But there always is a significant percentage of people who do engage and review somewhere. And, maybe they become, and I get new followers, and I get there are people with whom you connect when you put it out there. So absolutely. And the fact is sometimes the peripheral gigs of the book, like speaking, consulting, some of these things ultimately in the end pay more than the book, you know.
Yes, right.
So the book is kind of
Yes.
like a credibility key sometimes, or a credibility card that gets you in the door sometimes.
Yes. And I also think it's just a way to zero in on what's the concept, the theory, the information I want to share. It really makes you turn it into something that's concise.
Mhm.
And I think
Absolutely.
that's really helpful.
Yep.
Okay. So, Bruce, your fifth book is called Receiving Peace 39 Exercises to Help You Create Calm. And it's available on Amazon and on your website. And give us your website address again.
BruceMcIntyre.com.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bruce. Always great to connect and talk.
Thanks, Denise. Good to talk to you.
Thanks, everybody, so much for watching. Be sure to check out Bruce's latest book, Receiving Peace. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.